everybody, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make these adorable pumpkins. And I have all these different sizes here on different options on how big you can make your pumpkins. So that'll all depend entirely on how many chains you'll do, and I'll get to that in the further part of this video. So let's get started with what supplies you will need. All the supplies that I'm using in this video, I will have affiliated links in the description below. So be sure to check that out if you need any of these supplies. You are going to need any kind of yarn you want. You can use thicker yarn. It'll just affect the size of your pumpkin. So you may have to alter it according to how I'm showing it in this video, or acrylic yarn like this. Also, if you want to have a different color of yarn for the stem, I will be showing how to do that as well. Or you can use anything else for the stem. Some people will use sticks. You could use cinnamon sticks. You can use sticks from your yard. You can use corks. I mean, you can get really creative with what kind of stems you want to use. So if you want to crochet the stem, I can show you at the end, towards the end. Or you can use whatever you want for the stem. You'll also need some stuffing to stuff your pumpkin. You'll need a pair of scissors to cut off your loose ends, and I have a tapestry needle here. You can use any thick needle, will work best because you're going to have to sew through the yarn in order to sew up our pumpkin. So that's what all we'll need. So let's get started. And of course you will need a crochet hook as well, but I'm going to be using an H hook. So I recommend using whatever your yarn label suggests, and you can always change your size if you notice that there's some holes. If you get holes in your work, kind of like this, like there's quite some holes, your stuffing will show through and might even pull them bigger. So if you don't want that, I would definitely suggest using a smaller hook. So I used an I for this one, so I'm going to use an H to see if that'll make it a little smaller. So you'll have to play around because not all yarn is created equal. So it's just if you don't want to see the stuffing, because as you stuff it, it will pull these open. So just for your information. So I'm going to be showing how to do a small pumpkin. I'll give you the only thing that'll be different is the chains, on how many you will chain. So I will show for each pumpkin that I showed at the beginning on how many chains it took to make each one. So we're just doing the small pumpkin. So you'll start by doing your slip knot. If you're not familiar with how to do a slip knot, I would definitely suggest watching my tutorial on how to do a slip knot in my playlist for Crochet for Beginners. And I'm also going to be doing chaining, so if you're not familiar with chaining, there's also a video on how to do chaining as well in that same playlist, also linked below. So for this small pumpkin, we are going to chain 15. Alright, you should have your 15 chains. Make sure to count them to make sure you have 15. And remember, don't count the one that's on your hook because that doesn't count. So now that we have our 15 chains, you're going to single crochet in each stitch across. So you should have 14 stitches in the end if you're counting your stitches. just finished single crocheting all the way across. And like I said, you should have 14. If you're counting the tops here all the way across, it should have 14. So now we'll chain 1 and turn. Remember to turn our work. Now this is going to start what our repeat will be for the rest of this project. So instead of crocheting, because we'll single crochet, and instead of doing how we would normally single crochet, you've got your 2 stitches that we usually crochet into, but you're only going to do the front stitch. So if that makes any sense. So you've got your 2 V's and that first stitch, usually you would go straight into that one, but we're going to go straight into just that first loop and do a regular single crochet like we would do. So instead of doing it through both, you're just doing it through one. And you'll do that all the way across. So just do it in that first one. Just all the way across. I just reached the end and I only single crocheted in that that loop closest to us. So doing that, I'm just going to show you what it's been starting to do on our project, because we missed doing that other loop that was in the back. It creates kind of this line, and so that'll help create the little ridges on our pumpkin as we go. So that's why I was saying this will be our repeat for the rest of the pattern. So now we'll chain 1 again, turn our work, and you'll just repeat that. And I'll show you a trick to know how long your pumpkin needs to be, so then you don't have to worry about counting rows. So keep single crocheting in that first loop towards you to keep making your little line on the back. Oh, I just finished this row again, so I'll just keep going just back and forth, doing that same thing, just crocheting through that first loop only. I'll do quite a few rows and then I'll catch you up on how to do that trick I was talking about. So I've gotten quite a few rows done here. So the best way that I like to be able to not have to count and know how long to make my pumpkins is I just kind of create like a little triangle and kind of fold that corner up, and then I bring that up like that, and I do it one more time. So if I can fold it 3 times, that's when I know my pumpkin will be big enough. So that's just a trick I like to follow, because sometimes you want to just do these and make a bunch of pumpkins and you don't want to sit here and have to count all the rows. You can just crochet and then just do this quick little trick, and that matches at the top. So then I'll know that it's big enough. So then next is we will want to fasten off. So this was my hook when I finished my last row. So I'll draw it up a little bit and then cut my work and then pull that thread all the way through. I left a really long tail, which you'll need because we're going to sew these 2 ends together, and then we'll do a drawstring on both sides here. So we'll need quite a bit of yarn to do all of that. So this is where we want to thread our needle. Like so. And then I like to just kind of decide which side you want to be the outside and which side you want the inside. Because what we'll do is we're going to sew the outside. So this part that's going to be the outside, we'll sew it with the side that's going to be the inside. So I do that because when I'm going through my stitches along here, I can turn it out and then you don't see it and it looks nicer. So I always try to do my sewing on the inside with stuff like this so you just don't see where I'm sewing. But it really doesn't matter. I think both of these sides look pretty much the same, so it probably won't really matter on how you, unless you might have messed up on a stitch somewhere and it just doesn't look as pleasant. So just make that judgment yourself how you want. Just know that if you're sewing it the way I'm sewing it, this is going to be on the outside when we flip it. So we've got our long string here, and usually I just sew through both sides. So we got these, so I'll just sew through the top. So you find those two V's and then the two V's on this side, and I just pull that through. Watch out for that short little tail you have here. I'll bring this over, so we'll start on this front again. So I'll be always putting my needle in the front. Like that, you see how it's going to hold those together? So every time your yarn should be coming towards the front. So bringing your needle through the front. And you just do that all the way across. All right, I'm coming to my very last two stitches here of that row. So still doing what we've been doing towards the front and just pulling it through the back. All right, now you don't want to cut your yarn yet because we're going to start drawstringing through here. But this is the reason why I said, because you can see these and you won't see it on this side. So that's why we have this as the inside. So I forgot to film the part where once we finish sewing that we're supposed to flip it. So I forgot to film that part. So make sure you turn yours inside out before you do the drawstring portion. So then it will keep it looking neat like that. And then we'll start doing our drawstring next. I like to just gather, just pick up a loop. You can do multiple at a time if you want. I've been doing this a while, so I'll just do multiple, but you can even just pick up one and just draw it through. This is why I don't do just one at a time. It takes a while, but until you get used to it. So you can just, you're just picking up towards the front. So I'm grabbing my needle right under that one and kind of bringing it to the front to go into the front of this one. So you're constantly moving through the front. And you don't have to do every stitch if you don't want to. You can just kind of skip some. You don't want to skip too many because it'll create too much of a gap, but you can just do every couple. I'm just grabbing the stitches that are on that top so I can show you another group. Like this one right here is catching my eye. This one right here. And you're just grabbing a loop. You're not going through multiple loops. You're just grabbing one and going through the front. You just do that all the way until you find the beginning again. And that's where our beginning is, so I probably finish right there. That's the plus side of having the tail, is knowing where our beginning is. Alright, so we went through all of our stitches, and you can already kind of tell as we've been going, we've been kind of tugging it. So now this is where the drawstring comes in. So you'll just pull this yarn that we've been working with, and it will bring everything together. And you won't be able to completely close this hole because of how it bunches, so you'll have to do a little bit of sewing, but not much. So mine almost closed. So what I usually will do, because it's just a tiny hole, is I'll just kind of, this is where my yarn is coming out, so I'll kind of go across. You'll have to find your needle through the other side and pull through. And what that'll do is it'll start, you see that, it starts closing it in. And then I'll probably do another one coming up right here and go over and go through. To kind of just keep that hole a little smaller. It's a little tricky with everything bunching here. So right about there. And probably go right there. And then this will cross over and cover. So you may have to do that a couple times depending how big your hole plays out. Bigger pumpkin will have a much bigger one. So if this was we did a much larger one, the hole would be much bigger, so you'd have to sew a lot more. But this will be probably the bottom, because what I'll usually do is I'll leave the opening so I can stick the stick into the hole. Since this will be the bottom, I'm not worried too much about how much, because it won't be, you won't see it. So as long as you are good with how much is covered, I usually will tie off my yarn here. And I usually will just kind of grab a loop somewhere, maybe a couple, and start to pull, but leave a loop, small loop. So about like that, and then I'm gonna stick my needle through that loop to create a knot, and I'll do that a couple times to secure that yarn in place. So I think 2 times will do it for me. Then you can just leave a little bit of a tail and cut. And then you'll want to do the same thing on the other side. But before we do that, you'll want to start stuffing your pumpkin. So take however much stuffing you think you'll need. I usually try to fluff it a little bit just so that it's not so compacted, because it's a lot easier to work with when it's more fluffed. And start putting it in. And I always try to create like almost like a little donut hole to kind of push this out, so I can stuff it a little more firmly. And you don't want to do too much, because we still have to be able to close this, and you don't want to bulge your seams either. So you can always add a little bit more too, is the nice thing too. Alright, so I'm going to start with that. So to do the top part, I like to tie a little knot at the end of the yarn of the piece of the yarn that we're going to be sewing with. So I'll do a fairly good size knot, because you don't want it to go through the little holes that you have. So I'll usually do about 2 or 3 times to get it a pretty good size, just so it doesn't go through. And then I'll find a spot. You can even tuck this tail in. I would probably suggest that at this point you don't really need it to stick out. So I'll probably start around that same area. So find a spot where your yarn won't slip through, and that's why we tried to make a big enough knot. So I tried to find one that wasn't too big, so that'll be secured. So give it a test, make sure you don't want that to go through, or you'll be going in a circle trying to sew this. Alright, and then we'll do that same thing we did on this end, where we'll do the drawstring. So you just grab the front loops, every couple stitches and then pull. So you'll know when you reach the end is when you can see where you're not from the beginning. So now this is where you can start to slowly drawstring close, and this will get you an idea of whether you want to stuff it more before you close it all the way and the hole's too small. And even if you do it too small, like see I'm already going and I'm like, oh, I want to add some stuffing, you can pull it open because that's the drawstring. So you can change your mind. You can even see ahead of time, be like, oh, do I like the way this is looking? And you can pull it closed and then decide, okay, maybe I want a little bit more stuffing, and you can just pull it right open. Pretty handy. So I'm going to add a little bit more stuffing to mine. I think that should do it just fine. Like I said, you can even get it where it's a little bit more, and you can see how it's all planning out. So it says squishy as you want or as hard as you want. It just depends what you're trying to go for. So I'm going to probably keep it more light because it's not a very big pumpkin. Alright, so this is what I was talking about, where if you wanted to add a stick or a stem, this would be a good time to maybe leave it a little big. And then I would tie that thread that we had from the beginning when we were doing our rows. I would tie these two and then tuck it in and then glue the stem. But I'm going to show you guys how to do a crochet stem. So I'm going to tie this fairly well, or pull this as tight as I can, because I don't really want the big hole right there. And still do the same thing and tie it. I'll cut my string here. And these can be tucked in. You can even use like your crochet back of your hook to kind of push that in. You don't even have to worry about weaving them in if you don't want to. I'm going to be sewing over all this with a stem, so I'm not worried about trying to sew the ends in. I'll just tuck them in because they'll be pretty secured with the stem there. Alright, we're just about there. Alright, now we'll make our stem. So for this video purpose, I'm using this much lighter color because I typically would use a darker brown, but I want you guys to be able to see my stitches. So we'll use this this tan color. This wouldn't be the color I would typically use. You could. I wouldn't use this one specifically for a stem, just because I don't think it is quite the right color. But you won't have to do very much for the stem, because it'll depend on how big you want to make the stem actually. So we'll do our slip knot again, and then we'll chain, and this will really depend on your pumpkin size. So there's no real specific answer. It's all about how long you want. So I did 6 chains right here, and so I'm thinking what I'm gonna have is this is gonna be the stem, and then I'm going to eventually tuck it over. So I'm gonna do a couple rows. So I'm trying to think if that's even long enough. I might do one more. I might do 7 for the mine. So you'll play around with how big your pumpkin is, but I think chaining 7 will be good for this size. And you'll single crochet across, nice and easy. I just did that across. So again, this will be all about preference. You could just do two rows. So we had the chain and then we did that. So just do the 1 row. I'm probably going to do that because I like the way that looks. Or you could do another one if you want a really thick stem. But I think I'll just stick with just that one. So you'll fasten off if that's what you want. leave a decent amount. You don't need a lot because we're just going to be sewing. Oh, let's see. You'll be wanting to sew down the sides unless you want it to be opened. Again, all about preference. So I can show you what your options could be. So leave it a good size because it's not a very big piece. So that's about what I got. It's not very much. So pull my stitch through. So your options, if you want, you could just leave it where you just sew the bottom and it will kind of have an opening. You see that? You could do that. Or like I was saying earlier, you can sew down the sides here and then sew the bottom and it will all be closed as well. So you could do that. So it really is all about what preferences you want to do. And if you're going to sew down the sides, it'll be just like when we were sewing up the pumpkin. Just go through both loops. And then when you get to the top, I usually will just stick my needle through from here to go across to here and then go down. Just the same way we did with the sewing down the pumpkin. So that's up to what you want to do, preference-wise. I think I'm just going to leave mine open because I thought that looked pretty cute. So it's all what you really want to do. It's pretty versatile when it comes to these pumpkins. There's even some people that'll buy the little leather tags. You can have those. You don't necessarily have to put a stem on if you don't want. I've made a lot of pumpkins of different sizes. So like I showed at the beginning, you can make different sizes and you can stack your pumpkins. So you don't necessarily have to even have a stem if you don't want to. So I'm going to attach. I just went through and attached these bottom two pieces so that I can attach them onto here. And so I like to kind of go right out here and go towards the center to kind of have it where it will be. Got my tail there by accident. So it'll be a little more centered of where it needs to be. And try not to sew if you're going for the open look, try not to sew that closed as you're doing this. So I'm just kind of finding the center of this, because that's where I'm at, is in the center. So now it's sewed this, and now it's sewing in the center, and then I'm going to sew on the other side. So you might have to do that a couple times to hold it in place, but then it has that more open look. So I'm probably going to go one more time, maybe back through to hold that a little more in place. So it's all about your preference and how you want everything to look. And then this will be an extra thread that I'll just sew in. So I did kind of miss when there's a little bit of a gap right there. So you can either take some of the orange or whatever color your pumpkin is and go in with that. I might even just put a vine to kind of curl there. So I can show you guys how to do that here if you want to do a curly vine on your pumpkin as well. So 1 second. This is me getting ready to weave out my ends, so I just tucked them through so they came out. So I'm going to cut these. I don't have to weave them in really. So now we're going to do the little vine if you want to kind of cover up any imperfections or make it look a little more nice. I'm going to just use a green because I think that that'll work best. You can use whatever color you want. And using the same crochet hook here. So what you'll do kind of chain however long you want. It really doesn't matter. So let's see, I'm going to do... So this will get shorter. So I think that's a good length. So we got here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So I chained 14. So now with this, you'll just, so I just single crocheted and single crocheted. So I did 2 single crochets in 1 stitch. So I'm doing another one in that same stitch. And then I'm going to just do single crochet. I'm going to do 2. So it's very random, and it's just kind of to make it curve. So I had the 3, 1, and I'm going to do 2 in this next one. And 2 in this next one. And 2 in this next one. And 2 in this next one. So just keep doing 2 in each stitch all the way. 2 or 3. It's really up to how many curls. If you want it really curly, like at the beginning here, do 3. But if you want only a little bit of curl, do 2. So you get a little freedom there on how curly you want it to be. Towards the end here, where I'm getting to like the last 4 stitches, I'm going to just single crochet 1. Because that'll make it so I have something to attach my vine to the pumpkin. And it'll make it a little easier. And it also gives it that little hang down look. So I'm probably going to have it right here. So you can make it as curly as you want, or I think I'm actually going to not do that. I think I'm going to keep doing my 2. Actually, I think I'm going to do 3. And then do 2. Do 2. So yeah, basically it was either doing 2 or 3 in each to give it that curl. There we go. And I'm going to fasten off and leave a little tail just so we can sew it on. So you kind of saw that it was just kind of random, and it's kind of whatever you want it to be. You can make it shorter or longer. It's up to you. But that way I'll be able to sew this and cover up what I didn't like. Or you can just leave it plain, whatever you want to do. So I'm just going to sew mine on real quick, and then we'll have our pumpkin all done. So there we have our little pumpkin all finished. You also, if you want to, could add a face. I just cut out some felt and then hot glued it on for this pumpkin. So you can do lots of things with these pumpkins. Like I said earlier about stacking them, or adding faces, or adding the little vines. So you have lots of opportunities with these pumpkins. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any requests of projects that you want me to do tutorials on, please drop them in the comments below. If you have any questions or have struggles as well, please drop them in the comments. I will get to any of the comments that you guys leave.